What's up guys, it's Will back again, and today's review is the dramedy film 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Written and directed by Martin McDonagh, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri accounts the story of Mildred Hayes, who one day decides to rent 3 billboards designed to get the attention of local law enforcement. Mildred puts her message on these billboards because her daughter's case remains unsolved and she's unhappy with the lack of progress law enforcement is making finding the guilty party or parties. After Mildred puts her messages on these 3 billboards, people around town begin expressing their dissent, and the local police begin expressing their dissent as well, as they don't think the billboards that specifically target Sheriff Willoughby are very fair. And the rest of the film is spent watching Mildred seek justice for her daughter, while we also watch the Ebbing Police Department attempt to solve the crime and fan the flames of outrage. Alright, so let me just say this right off the bat. 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri is not your traditional film, not by any stretch of the imagination. This is definitely one of the more unique films I've seen this year, because it really does take a serious and really creative premise and weaves it into a story that's full of drama, comedy, and harsh realities. It's just a very different type of movie than what we're used to in 2017. In a time of reboots and remakes, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri goes the opposite direction. Martin McDonagh really did create something very different here, because it doesn't seem like black comedy films are really, the genre as a whole just isn't really that prevalent anymore, at least not in the traditional mainstream market. I mean, you still have Quentin Tarantino, who's like the master of the genre, but generally speaking, you don't have too many black comedy films anymore that show up on the mainstream. But this film did remind me of a Tarantino film in some ways, but definitely a more serious version. What I liked about 3 Billboards was that its foundation is laid on drama, and the comedy is sort of sprinkled in for some flavor along the way. First and foremost though, this story is about Mildred Hayes and her pursuit of justice for her daughter when seemingly everyone has forgotten about her except her mother. Hell, even the police seem to have forgotten about her. Mildred is motivated to act boldly because she seeks justice when seemingly no one else does. She's willing to do just about anything to get that justice, and I think the fact that she's desperate makes her story all the more compelling. She's willing to take the law in her own hands, and it's really interesting to watch her do whatever it takes, because ultimately it does help her at the very least bring the case back into the public eye. I love the moral ambiguity with Mildred as a character, but honestly, this all starts and ends with Frances McDormand. In some ways, I felt like she carried this movie. At the very least, she elevated it up a couple notches because of how amazing her performance is. I think this is definitely one of the best performances of the year, because Mildred is flawed, she's layered, she's incredibly tough, but she's also pretty damn funny sometimes too. She's just a really awesome character overall, and Frances McDormand really excelled in this role. I think every time she's on screen, the film's elevated a couple notches, and every time she's not on screen, the film's de-elevated a couple notches. I think without her Oscar-worthy performance, this movie is honestly probably not near as good, and that's not necessarily a knock on the film itself, but more just a testament to just how great Frances McDormand is in this role. When an actor delivers a performance that almost single-handedly elevates a film to great heights, that's when you know it's really an exceptional actor and one worth recognizing. Frances McDormand has become that level actor, and she obviously deserves some serious recognition for that. But it's not like the rest of the cast is bad. The truth is actually the opposite of that. There's a couple characters and performances that I really liked as well besides Frances McDormand. Woody Harrelson plays Sheriff Willoughby, and I thought he really shined in this film, and Sam Rockwell plays Officer Jason Dixon, and he was really good too. They both play cops with different approaches to solving crimes, and their differences actually made for a pretty compelling duo, and all their flaws, that is. This movie was actually a lot darker than I thought it'd be, to be honest. There's a lot of topics like police brutality and racism and domestic violence and other things that really do play a big role in this story. I guess they call it a black comedy for a reason, because they're poking fun at subject matter that's generally considered very, very serious, but this movie does know when to take things seriously. When the comedy needs to take a backseat and you need to feel the character's sadness, anger, and despair, you do. And I really admire this movie for knowing when not to pull punches and when to lighten the mood. It's tough to pull that off, but they do it. And because they pull this off, there's a lot of development and a lot of growth that takes place for the main cast of characters. You see them evolve over the 2-hour runtime, and you see how that evolution leads them to make certain decisions, good and bad. Those decisions end up affecting a lot of people, considering it's a story about a small town with a small town atmosphere that allows everyone to know what's going on pretty much at all times. This is a very isolated story, and I loved it for that because the characters all have a unique way of looking at things, a unique perspective on the world that seems fairly specific to the residents of this small town. The sense of atmosphere is really strong here, and this will help you really immerse yourself into Ebbing, Missouri. It will also help you better understand why the conflict exists in the first place, why this crime even occurred in the first place, and how the rule of law is applied in this small town. The sense of atmosphere is very, very strong here. But with that said, there are some problems I had with this film. First, I think the pacing is occasionally not the best. In the beginning, I felt like we were rushing through things really quickly and speeding through scenes that needed more time to develop. And later in the film, I felt like we were slowed to a crawl and were dragging things out in order to make the movie longer. What this boils down to for me is that the emphasis was placed on wrong moments from time to time, like the film didn't always emphasize the strongest beats. It doesn't happen all the time, but it is noticeable every once in a while. There's also some really questionable storytelling decisions that I felt diminished my own personal investment in the story. There's certain relationships and certain decisions that I can't fully get into without spoiling for you that I felt make the story take a sharp left turn, so to speak. There's things that happen that you're not going to expect, and it's good to keep you guessing, but sometimes it feels like the story just tries to be different rather than to just tell a cohesive story in general. I think the ending is the biggest example of that. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but I was very underwhelmed with it. I can kind of see why they chose to go that direction, because it does align with the film as a whole, or the tone of the film as a whole, but I really feel like it's going to leave a lot of viewers cold. I totally get what they were going for, but I just don't think it will be satisfying for most audiences. But overall, I think 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri is a good film. It's certainly worth your time, and it's probably going to be in the running for a few Oscar nominations. I thought it had exceptional acting from Frances McDormand and the other cast members, a really harsh but funny brand of comedy, a strong sense of atmosphere, and some really well-written characters and dialogue. As for the cons, I do think the pacing was sometimes off, and a couple key narrative decisions, especially the ending, felt weak to me. I'm going to give 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri an 8 out of 10, and recommend you check this one out in theaters if you're looking for a unique, funny, and well-acted drama film. I think this one will appeal to the film buff crowd more than anyone else. So did you guys see 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri yet? What did you think of it? And if not, let me know why not. And also let me know what you think of this year's crop of movies so far. I'd say that as far as artsy dramas go, it's been a relatively weak year so far, but there's still time. That's all for now though. This is WillFoxification signing off. See you in the next video.